From the days of inception to the glorious present and the incredibly promising future, including IPL 2025 mega auction, is what we discuss on this episode of the Indian Cricket Podcast. A financial deep dive into the auction, the IPL, the franchisees, and the players is what we're promising to you on this episode of the podcast. And to do so, I brought on former athlete representative, former sports management professional, and now successful investor in the fashion and sports space, Dhruv Mullick, who absolutely nailed it on this episode of the podcast. And along with Dhruv, Shashank Kishore, who is ESPN Cricinfo's star cricket correspondent for the last 10 years, writing some of the best bylines that we've seen in the cricket journalism space. And the three of us went down the rabbit hole of discussing all things IPL finances, of course, from the early days of the IPL to how the league has grown from 2008 to 2024, and now the next phase of the IPL, which includes the IPL 2025 auction. We take a look at a number of teams, including ownership of teams, RTMs, salary caps, salary purses, how players are approaching auctions, and a whole lot more. This is an episode if you're looking for a financial deep dive into all things IPL, and not necessarily which team should retain which player and how much should they keep in their purse, etc. So if that resonates with you, I think you should head over and watch the entire episode. And while you're doing so, hit the like and the subscribe button and share this episode with your friends. And so without further ado, let's roll on this episode of the Indian Cricket Podcast with me, Sumit Bilgi, joined by Dhruv Mullick and Shashank Kishore. Enjoy. The hangover of the IPL continues to stay. I think the way I look at it, the IPL finishes end of May, and then you have a hangover for a couple of months. You've had enough of it. You just want to look away from white ball cricket for a bit. But come August, every year, there's something that breaks on the internet that is related to the IPL. Every team starts looking at what they need to do next. Players start thinking about what they need to do next. But this time, it's that and more, because we're at the foothills of yet another evolution of the league.
No, it's changed. I think just to answer your question straight off, is that the league is a multi-billion-dollar business. It is one of the most lucrative, most successful businesses to ever enter Indian sport. And I think that's just the reality of what it is. We read news when the broadcast rights were renewed about how it's the second highest after the NFL. But the league's presence as a franchise business is immense. You just have to look at what happened during the T20 World Cup, where you had Jay Shah meeting Roger Goodell, who's the commissioner of the NFL. So now the IPL holds that position among the NBA, among the NFL. And that's phenomenal, because we're talking about a league that's had hardly, what are we talking about, Shashank, less than 20 seasons or about? So that's number one. And number two, the constant evolution from the time I worked has obviously been, in the beginning, teams were struggling to make money. There was massive cash burn, right? Cash flow issues. But then first in 2017, when the first set of broadcasting rights were renewed, things changed. Now when things happened last year, 2 years ago when they renewed it again, the $6 billion, things changed again. Salary caps have gone up. Uncapped Indian players now all go into the auction. So these are the 2-3 things that have been prominent. But most importantly, it's a profitable business. Franchise owners make a great return. Sponsors make a great return. Players are getting paid handsomely, which they deserve. So I think from that standpoint, it's been amazing to watch this grow over the years.
Just to build on what he said, when the first set of teams were bought, the most costliest team at that point was Mumbai Indians, of course, at $111.8 million. And the dollar to the rupee was around 40, so you equate roughly 440 crores or something. That just goes to show new owners who are coming into the league or who are interested are going the extra mile, knowing that there are returns to be made. So a team today stands to probably make about 600 or 650 crore just from the central media rights, sponsorships, and all the other gate receipts and stuff put together. So that's the income that they're guaranteed outside of all the other partnerships and other businesses that they've got. So it's a massive money spinner, and it's come a long way. I mean, you had a lot of team owners who were wary initially when they put the bid. Not sure if they're going to get a return on investment. And Dhruv and I have had long chats over this with earlier when it was, known that Vijay Mallya actually wanted to go for Bombay and not Bangalore, and then he had to settle for Bangalore. And a number of other teams, owners put up multiple bids, and the first bid was followed by lower bids for the other teams. So they've come a long way. I mean, today if we were to have a new, fresh set of auctions, it's entirely possible the first set of owners, a lot of them, may not be able to, probably place winning bids. That's the nature of competition that's grown, and the businesses have the kind of interest that they've shown in being associated with the league in any way. It's hard to imagine. I mean, so probably KKR or whoever it is. I mean, so big teams, big budgets, big purses. It's just grown bigger and bigger and bigger over the last 15 years.
Also remember, Sumit, the franchise fee for the initial teams, what Shashank mentioned, 2008 to 2017, you only paid the annual franchise fee during that 10-year period. After that, you didn't have to. After 2017, when Star won the broadcast and the central media rights for 16,000 crore, teams started seeing that influx of over 200 crore just in the share of broadcasting rights. 2023, when it was redone, it went up to $6 billion, which is, we're talking 50,000 crores. So imagine that going up so many times. And the value of the team, as he rightly mentioned, $100 million in 2008, CVC Capital bid 5,000 crore as their opening bid, which pushed Sanjeev Goenka to bid 7,000 crores for Lucknow, which was $1 billion US. So just look at it from that standpoint, it's crazy. And that then has a rub-off on salary caps, it has a rub-off on central broadcast rights. So, I mean, look, we're having this conversation also a little while after the Olympics. And the best way to explain this to people is that I always say in India, look at cricket and look at sport as two different things. Don't look at them together, because cricket is not a national sports federation. It's not a national sports association. It's independent, unlike the Olympic sports, which are, just like any other ministry in India, a central ministry, a state ministry. That's how other sports are run. And they're highly dependent on government money and taxpayer money, whereas the BCCI is an independent entity. The BCCI is the franchisor in this case. And all these franchisees who have paid millions and millions of dollars, $1 billion now to own teams, are running, I mean, it's pure capitalism. It's no different from the NBA or the NFL. I know some people, when I say this, they say, how you comparing it to established franchise leagues that have been there for generations. But it just shows that the IPL in such a short time, 20 seasons, maybe less, has achieved that level, which makes it phenomenal.
You've gone that route with the advancement of the century and the growth of digital and the growth of media. That's supplemented. What I feel at the core of it is the on-field performances, right? There's been tremendous advancement in the on-field performances, and I feel at the core of setting your team well is the auction. How you put your team together, right? How you put your team together in the mega auction, how do you sort of add to it and subtract with it in the smaller auctions. And the auction has been this revered event every year where we've all looked up to it, and now the stakes are getting higher and higher, Shashank, with every year. So in your years of covering the IPL, talk us about how important is the auction, and how the value of the auction has changed over the years to what it is now going to be in 25.
Firstly, I think building of talent and depth hasn't come overnight. It's taken a long period of time. And Dhruv will attest to this. When the IPL was in its infancy, the Syed Mushtaq Ali Trophy, which is seen as the kind of the benchmark for scouts to be, picking young Indian talent, was just one season old. So they didn't have really too many avenues to go and look for players playing in T20 tournaments. So in the first few years, you had a lot of teams pick 40-member squads. I'm sure when Dhruv landed in South Africa, he must have been tearing his hair out because he had to organize and be a part of a squad that, ensured that training was spread across for 40 members. And some of these members wouldn't even travel to intercities or whatever. They'd be stationed in one venue and only go if absolutely necessary, because it's impossible to, travel with such a large contingent and look after everybody in a net session and stuff. So teams used to be having massive squads back then, because partly that was down to not knowing who fits a specific role.
Yeah.
So if they needed a backup wicket keeper, they probably had 2 or 3 in the reserves who they could probably look at and test out and bring in or whatever.
Yeah.
So unlike today where teams know who they want for and go all out at the auction.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. So a lot of teams, including Chennai Super Kings, who were runners-up in the first season, went to these first division leagues in Tamil Nadu and Chennai to look for players who they could feature. RCB had a bunch of young players coming in from the Karnataka group. A lot of teams went local and picked a lot of players who were playing league cricket or club cricket in that particular city because there wasn't too many other options or avenues. Today there is a T20 league in every state or nearly every state for them to look for talent and pick players. They also go have a scouting network abroad, especially with different leagues there, the South Africa 20, the BBL or the ILT20, and a lot of the IPL owners have picked up stakes in different teams across. So it's now become a network of well-rounded scouting systems that are all coming together and assembling squads. So that's a little bit about the depth. When it comes to the auction, I mean, one of the spectacles of the IPL is the auction, right? I mean, it's the allure of the IPL is the auction. It drives in massive digital revenues and traffic and monetization. It's a monetizable property. I mean, if the auction were to be a separate property in the IPL where the BCCI were to invite bids for title rights, I'm sure it's going to get a significant chunk. It definitely will because that's how big the auction is, especially with the build-up to the auction, the pre-auction transfer news or the pre-auction retention news or whatever associated with the auction. It's massively monetizable. So that's gone massive from probably the first year itself. But over time, the magnitude of it has become immense. What the auction also has done over time is, as Dhruv referred to earlier, you had a situation in the first few years where the uncapped players were signed outside the auction, including some legends like Virat Kohli, who was picked up by RCB for 10 lakh in 2008. And today, you've got some uncapped players probably making about 3 or 4 crores or 5 crores at an auction because, the BCCI decided that it wasn't probably a right decision to bracket players into uncapped or capped, and everyone went into the auction. So that's been a massive step because it's opened up avenues. A player is no longer dependent on just playing a domestic season and then coming in as an uncapped player, waiting to be picked up at a base price, whereas he can go into the auction and be on a level playing field with everyone else there. So that's been a massive step. What I'd like to see the IPL do is, or address in some capacity, we were also talking briefly about this off air, is that the biggest USP of the IPL has been that the auction is a level playing field. Everyone has a set purse. You have this much money to spend, and it depends on your smart and your auction strategy that determines who you get and how you go about the auction. And different teams have different strategies. But it's not new. It's happened even with Chris Gayle when he was signed in 2011 as a replacement player midway through the season.
For Dirk Nannes.
He was paid on paper about $600,000.
Because that was Dirk
Nannes' fee. So he was paid $600,000. He came in. Chris Gayle was retained next year, as was Dirk Nannes, was he? And then Chris Gayle on paper continued to remain at the same amount of money.
Yes.
But obviously his market value was way higher. So then RCB had to compensate him through, endorsements and sponsorships. They made him the brand ambassador of their McDowell's and Force India and, all the other White and McKay and all the other associate brands in the company to kind of make up for that shortfall. So, but I think the rules need a little bit of reworking just so that this level playing field, which is one of the magics of the IPL, continues to remain intact.
And just to articulate what Shashank is saying is very similar to the point about how the IPL is a franchise model. Now, the difference between a closed-off franchise league like the NBA, NFL, IPL is that you have a salary cap, you have a salary cap for each team, and you're within that. European football, which is the open league, where you have promotion relegation, is you don't have a salary cap. So you'd never know Manchester City can pay a lot more money than, say, an Arsenal or any of the bottom teams in the Premiership. So this business model, Sumit, is something that does not it's very hard to account for a transfer fee. So, a lot of experts had said, has the IPL tried to inculcate a European football open league model into a closed franchise system? So as the league evolves, players are understanding it more. There's still a lot of things, Shashank, that they still don't understand fully, but educating the players, the difference between open league versus closed league, franchise league versus promotion relegation is very important. Salary cap versus transfer fee, so that they understand how it works. The uncapped player has been one of the best rules of the BCCI and the IPL, because Indian uncapped players were disillusioned. I was working for RCB when the Manish Pandey issue happened, and his whole mentality was, why should a foreign uncapped player go into an auction and earn millions of dollars, when as an Indian uncapped player, why should I be stuck at 10 lakh, 20 lakh, 30 lakh? So then, transparency becomes an issue, because they would negotiate contracts with franchises directly. Now, the best thing about the IPL is that everybody, capped, uncapped, Indian uncapped, foreign uncapped, all goes into the auction. However, if you start bringing in a European style transfer, that's the kind of level playing field that could get altered, as what Shashank has rightly said. So going forward, the only way a player gets bought is if he's in an auction or if he's retained prior to an auction. You have a pre-auction retention. Maybe, and this is something, Shashank, we've spoken about a lot, is that only these two avenues should remain. You shouldn't have trades and transfers.
You've obviously spent time on the players side of things, right? There's obviously, we're obviously speaking about the league and what the league needs to do. But what's the story on the player side, Dhruv? You've spent time on that side.
Of course. And see, the player side, Sumit, is one which makes our system in India very unique, is that player agents, player managers or player consultants cannot get involved in on-field contracts, whether it's an IPL contract, whether it's a BCCI contract. See, we don't have that perfect segregation like the US. And I'm using the US as an example only because they've got the most number of franchise leagues in the world.
Yeah.
And the IPL was modeled on that,
yeah.
right? So the LeBron James example is perfect, where Rich Paul looks after his NBA on-field salary contract and Maverick Carter does everything off the court, marketing, sponsorships, etc. So does a player understand his contract? Does a player understand what his budget is? Does a player understand how it works? Now, when I was an employee, and Shashank's aware of this, in 2010, 2011 with RCB, we had retained Virat Kohli prior to the auction. And the biggest question Virat Kohli and Virat Kohli's brother had at the time is that, how does it all work? So there were 4 slabs. This was when the first set of contracts were done. So 2008, 9, 10 was your first slab. After 2011, each team had a budget of $9 million. And there were 4 slabs. So there was 1.8 million, 1.2 million, and then there was,
750,000 and
500,000. You're right. So you could, if you were going to retain one player, $1.8 million would go out of your purse. And then you'd just be left with $7.2 million for the auction. Also, Sumit, the auction then was in US dollars. It only became rupees much later because of the exchange rate getting hammered. Yeah. The exchange rate was 40, 45 back in the day. Yeah. So that was one. So what happened was Virat Kohli, that was one of the things. So, I had to fly to Baroda where he was playing an ODI and explain the contract to him and get it signed. And yes, we had paid him lesser than $1.8 million. We had negotiated a fee. But when the auction happened in 2011, and that's, I think I remember because I was at the time when Shashank and I had first met, Pujara went for huge money in that auction. You remember Saurabh Tiwari going for $1.6 million? So Virat Kohli, who was arguably one of the best 50-over players in the world, even at that time.
Undervalued.
Yeah, he just said, look, I have been undervalued because I would have got more money in an auction. Then things subsequently changed when, he got retained for more money. But the players from, say, 2009, 10 and 11 to 2025 now, are understanding a lot more. They're asking a lot more questions.
Which is good.
However, I still feel that because this is where foreign players have it a little easier. Because foreign agents are allowed to not negotiate a contract, but be involved in communication. So they can talk to franchises, they can find out things and explain to their players a lot more. If you're an Indian manager or an agent and you call up an IPL franchise, you're breaching BCCI guidelines. So it's not allowed. Whether people are doing it or not, it's illegal if you're an Indian representative. So the franchise talks to people. And my most recent job, as you're aware, when I was representing Mayank, 2022, when he was being retained, the process, Shashank, was very simple. The chartered accountant was just advising him on he's going to earn more salary, so how does his taxation work? And his lawyer was advising him on the contract. My job as an off-field representative was only to come in and, then tell the franchise, okay, Mayank's a brand ambassador with Boat and Dream 11, ambush marketing, how it works, things like that.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with negotiation.
Yeah.
So the highest second retention fee is 12 crore. He talks to the franchise, signs his contract.
Yeah.
Now players want to understand more. Players want to understand, can we negotiate more contracts?
Rajat Patidar, for example, from RCB,
Yeah.
he was signed as a replacement player midway through one season.
Yeah.
His contract fee was 20 lakh, right?
Yes.
So he gets retained the following year, in which he has a breakthrough year. He hits 100 in the playoff, and that knock propels him into the Indian team, and he goes on to make his one-day debut.
Yeah.
He goes on to play Test cricket for India, but he comes back to the IPL this year, for example, as a 20 lakh player, whereas his market value over the last 1 year has just skyrocketed. And Rajat Patidar had a wonderful IPL this year with the 6 hitting, and he was one of the key players in RCB's unreal run to the playoff. So his market value shot up. And if he were to have been at the auction, the mini auction last year, before this season, there's no way he would have been a 20 lakh pick.
Of
He would have
course,
probably
yeah.
had 4 teams fighting for him for maybe 4 crore or 5 crore. So what the BCCI did, using that example, is that any player in the intervening period between 2 seasons, if he were to get capped and if he were to play like 5 test matches or 10 one-dayers or 10 T20s or whatever, his contract automatically upgrades. So
crore, right?
if it's a 20 lakh contract, it
Yeah.
becomes a 50 lakh contract.
Yeah.
In the case of Rinku Singh, I think whose contract was 55 lakh or 75
Yes,
lakh, I'm not
55
entirely
lakh,
sure.
55.
Yeah.
55.
Yeah.
He went on to hit those 6 sixes, and his one innings is all it took for his brand value, his market value to just shoot up.
Yeah.
And then he built on that early success, had a fantastic season,
Yeah.
developed this reputation as being that finisher, ice calm, ice cool under pressure and all that. His market value shot up. He's gone on to play for India.
Yeah.
And his contract was upgraded from 55 lakh to a crore.
Yeah.
But the salary cap, the deductions were only 55 lakh.
I was going to ask
But
you
the
that.
BCCI ruling meant that it was 1 crore.
So where does that money go from? Is that part of salary?
That money is paid by the franchisee, but it's not deducted from the purse, it's my understanding.
Correct, but that's not fair. That's again a salary cap thing,
But
right?
that's a ruling that the BCCI is introduced to ensure that players who get capped between
Yeah.
seasons are somewhat compensated,
Correct,
even
correct.
if it's not entirely fair. Because if Rinku Singh were to be in an auction, he's surely going to
Of
earn
course,
more than
yeah.
1 crore.
So
right?
you're saying his contract gets upgraded to 1 crore, but
Contract got upgraded to 1 crore.
But he gets paid only 55.
The 55 lakh that he was signed for
Yeah.
is the money that is deducted from the
From the
auction
purse.
purse, not the 1 crore.
Yeah.
Because the 1 crore is an additional bonus that the BCCI has incentivized him
Yes.
for,
I like that
you know,
rule.
making
It's nice.
making his debut and playing for India for so many games.
Everyone is in the IPL for the business angle. CVC Capital are a private equity company who bought a team.
Yeah.
They are most likely to get an exit in 2 seasons,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Franchise owners have invested for maximizing return.
And there are buyers ready to lap it up. It's
Yeah.
not like,
Yeah.
CVC wants to sell, but they're
Correct.
struggling to find potential buyers.
Yeah.
Someone else is coming in, and CVC probably
Correct.
will make a neat profit
Yeah.
and, make a killing maybe.
He's right. So
So there is a lot of demand as well. So it's not like, I think there was a point in where we were talking about it very recently, where 2016, 17, just around the time Vijay Mallya was to exit,
Yeah.
or Diageo, or when he was offered a settlement as part of his exit from the larger group company,
Yeah.
there were question marks over what happens to RCB, and I think the
Yeah.
owners at that point in time were potentially looking at different options.
Yeah.
Not entirely sure if they wanted, cricket as part of their bucket.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because the Formula One team was on its
Interesting.
last legs, and
Yeah,
Force India was sold, and I think
Yeah, you're right.
someone else bought. Who was the one? Spiker
Yeah.
was the one that Vijay Mallya bought and renamed as
Yes,
Force
Force
India.
India. You're right.
And
yeah.
Force India went in, and it was rebranded into another
Correct,
team. So
correct.
Aston
Yeah.
Martin.
yeah, so that was around the time that they weren't sure if they wanted to continue. I think they are now thanking their stars that they didn't kind of sell their stake. whether partially or whether fully
Yeah.
at that point. And today RCB is a massive giant. They may have just won one title in the Women's Premier League, not in the IPL.
Yeah.
But
But
the
I think
brand
as a
values,
brand,
yeah,
I think they're among the top three. I mean, in terms of brand
sure.
value and everything in
So it
engagement.
ended
on
up being
digital.
brilliant for Diageo to hold on to that.
Yeah.
So look, every owner looks from a business point of view. There's no reason the players should not.
Yeah.
The players have every right to earn maximum money.
Yeah.
And
Dhruv, talk about CVC, and we had this conversation off air,
Yeah.
and how it's been a fantastic investment for them. Gujarat Titans, absolutely amazing. 2021 they enter,
Yeah.
and 3 years later, look at where they're at. They're at a fantastic position. So that in itself shows the rate of growth for franchisees in the last few
No,
years.
of course.
Right?
And I think the
So,
analyst...
so just walk us through.
No, I think whoever the analyst was at CVC Capital, when the auction was happening for the new teams, as KSR, K. Srinivas Rao has said a number of
our
times,
channel
he
as well.
deserves a massive raise because... So what happened, Shashank, when the bidding was going on for the new teams, everyone expected Adani to bid for Gujarat. I don't think... So this happened in 2021.
Yes.
Or it might have been... It was prior to IPL 2022 when the US dollar INR value was still 70.
72.
Yeah.
Probably not. I mean, late 70s, I'd imagine. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what had happened with that is that because their opening bid was 5,000 crore,
Yeah.
Sanjeev Goenka had to push his bid over 7,000 crores for Lucknow, which is where it kind of pushed it to $1 billion that way. And CVC Capital is a private equity company.
Yeah.
That is when for the first time everyone kept asking what is CVC, what it does, because private equity investment in sport is known in franchise leagues the world over. But I keep telling you this, the news that had actually come out a couple of months ago when people didn't realize is that in IPL 2021, Redbird Capital, which is again a large private equity firm, they invested in Rajasthan Royals. Right? See the chain of events. That comes in, then another private equity company like CVC Capital buys an entire franchise. IPL 2022, what happens? Redbird Capital gets Chris Paul into the IPL. So, and now we're talking 2024, they're looking to exit. So, private equity companies invest in sports leagues, invest in sports franchises, wait for a massive valuation, and then exit. In 2 years, if the media reports are to be true, they're looking at what? A 10,000 crore exit. Oof. So, from whether Adani Group buys it or anybody else. So, that just shows how profitable this is as a business, right? And that's what's phenomenal. So, I think from that standpoint, I know Hardik comes into a lot of conversations. The owners were looking at a commercial return, invest, get a big exit.
Yeah.
Why should a player look any different?
Yeah.
That's just the premise of my argument in this.
Yeah, and I think they should be lauded for this, as opposed to a lot of people look at this narrative and think, a lot of people look at cricket from a very romantic lens.
Yeah.
But it's the IPL, for all its romance, is also business. It's cutthroat business.
Capitalism. It's capitalism.
It is capitalism.
Yeah.
And, I think the people watching this podcast should realize that we look at it for what it is.
Yes.
And laud it for
course.
what it is, right? And not talk down to it because we are talking numbers, and because that's what sport has become now.
Yeah.
Right? It's especially in this country, that's the value of the IPL and that's the value of cricket. And I think, with my experience of being at GT in my little capacity, I think they did a great job on the field, off the field. They had the right things in place. They had the right people leading them. They had the right players.
Yeah.
They had the right mentality. And it's paid them dividends. They've done things right. So, like the both of you are saying, if you do things the right way, and you follow a structure and a path, and you make the right investment, there's great return.
Yeah, and to add to what Shashank said, when he mentioned about when Diageo acquired United Spirits, and because RCB, which the holding company was Royal Challengers Sport Private Limited, was a wholly owned subsidiary of USL. So when Diageo bought USL, this wholly owned subsidiary came along with it, right?
Yeah.
And again, if you ask a lot of people in Bangalore who owns RCB, they still don't know. Only because it was a corporate that acquired a parent company, and as a result, it
This
came
is despite Bangalore being obsessed with startups and who owns what and who wears equity and what happens.
Yeah, no, because see, like, so now you think about it, when it's so complicated at that level, how do you expect a player to understand his IPL contract? So at the time, Parth Jindal of JSW owned the football team in Bangalore, Bengaluru FC. he was very keen to acquire RCB at the time. You know?
I did not know that.
Yeah. So it's online. I mean, look at it. So he wanted to buy the team. That didn't happen. And then he went and he bought 50% of Delhi Daredevils at the time, which then became Delhi Capitals, GMR Group, who owned the team.
Yes.
So, and, just the question on CVC, what I see happening going forward is that a lot of owners have seen the benefits. I think the only exit we've seen, Shashank, was the 50% sale that GMR did when they entered in with JSW. No other franchises have fully sold, but I see a lot of franchises in the future maybe looking for new investment, maybe getting people in. Teams like Rajasthan Royals have done this very well. Private equity will come in either partially, because Redbird Capital, as I said, first came into Rajasthan Royals, then you had a private equity come in. So owners are going to look for exits, maybe not, let's see. But I'd like to see it because that's also what happens in the NBA. Mark Cuban has sold the Dallas Mavericks after so many years, makes a massive return. Michael Jordan sold the Charlotte Hornets. So that's a big premise for franchise sport. Invest, a great business model, profitable business model, make your return when you want to. Same for the players. So it all comes in together.
And I think it all adds up in a way where the money that they can earn from the IPL is something they're investing into other properties, like say the Kolkata Knight Riders is now a proper group, a cricket group that has teams in the US. They're co-investors in the league. They're the MLC. They've got a team in the CPL. They've got a team in the ILT20. So all these offshoots are coming up, and that's primarily because the main core product, which is the IPL, is kind of fueling that economy and fueling that investment into helping them branch out elsewhere. So that's happened with KKR, that's happened with now Rajasthan Royals. They've got a team in the CPL. Sunrisers Hyderabad have a team in the South Africa League, SA20.
And they've done well.
And they've done well. Chennai Super Kings have a team in South Africa. They have a team in the MLC. So you're seeing a lot of the value that the IPL is delivering to these franchise owners, translating into big investments elsewhere, and making them a massive money spinner.
I think where we started off this conversation, IPL 2025, obviously, now the way I look at it, we are entering this new phase for the IPL, right? Obviously the media rights have been in place for a bit. There are couple of teams are looking like we've addressed, probably getting in new ownership in place. A lot of teams are looking at head coach replacements. A few captains might go here and there. Few players are looking at what could be the best possible deal for them. So, and a lot of like top tier India players are now thinking, hang on a minute, how do I approach this next phase of my IPL career? So
and there was no consensus in the meeting, right?
I think
by the time this video comes out, there might be an announcement.
I think these meetings aim to serve is what the owners want, the wish list that the owners have got, and what they want the BCCI to hear through the media. Because obviously the BCCI only acknowledged that the owners met, and it was a very cordial meeting, and everyone discussed rules and retentions and all that. But obviously, what we hear from people who were part of the meeting is that everyone had a different point of view. Kolkata Knight Riders, for example, and Sunrisers Hyderabad, who played the final, right? They wanted maximum retentions, quite understandably, right? Because they've spent years grooming players. KKR, for example, they've got their own academy set up, and they work all year round with players, and with Abhishek Nair, who's now with the Indian team, he's been kind of instrumental in building that bench strength. So they went and identified Varun Chakravarti from the TNPL. They get him in. Rinku Singh, they get him in. You saw a young player like Raghuvanshi, who came and did really well. Harshit Rana has done really well. Vaibhav Arora has done really well. So they've gone and handpicked a bunch of players. They've kind of given them all the backing away from the glare, and they've kind of brought them up to a certain level. And they're now saying that it's time for them to leave, because if they were to have 4 retentions, it's possible all these guys are not going to be part of the retentions, right? So they want maximum retentions. Sunrisers, for example, they've got a World Cup winning captain in Pat Cummins. They've got Travis Head, who's done really well, and Abhishek Sharma and Klaasen. And the list is long, right? And they've had a history of performing well this year after like 3 or 4 bad years in the IPL where they were in the second half or at the bottom.
Yeah.
So and so it's only natural that they don't want they want maximum retentions.
Yeah.
Whereas a team like Punjab Kings, who kind of chop and change every year and who don't have a settled core, if they were to have maximum of 8 retentions or whatever that's being being spoken about, they're going to be left with nothing in the auction for them to go after apart from a handful of players. So I think what comes out in the media is what the teams want to know, what the teams want, rather than what's actually, the way forward.
That comes back to your communication.
What comes back to the communication. So I think a lot of grey areas that need to be addressed, but which we can speak over a cup of coffee or anything else.
Yeah. What I'd like to see, just going forward is that I understand, and because the BCCI wants to make the auction a property in itself, you need players.
It is already a property in itself. It's not like it's not like they want to make it.
They want to make it bigger. They want to take it to Saudi Arabia, Turkey,
whatever it
Dubai,
is. The auctions now in Dubai, and it's now a physical auction where they're selling tickets for people to come and watch.
It is.
That is how massive it is.
Of course,
I mean, an auctioneer.
This fan engagement that happens there.
Who was replaced midway because of an illness. That became massive news.
News,
So auction itself is news.
Yeah.
The build-up of the auction is even bigger. The broadcasters are absolutely milking it. I mean, you've got shows on Star which do an auction reveal or the pre-season retentions reveals. Geo is doing that, so they've got pre-shows, post-shows for the auction. So it's a massive property in itself. So I don't see why the BCCI will want to,
have too many
diminish
retentions.
the value of an auction by saying that, okay, we'll do a mega auction every 5 years, as some teams wanted every 5 years. I'm not sure that's going to sit well with the BCCI, because every 3 years, I mean, sure, we'll give you these many retentions, but you have to start from scratch.
See, Shashank, if a team,
whether right or wrong, I think auction, if it's a property in itself, then the BCCI wants to make sure that it's got its own place in the overall scheme of things.
Just to add to that point, I think the rate of change in the world today, 5 years is a long time.
Yeah, huge.
5 years.
No, but
is
that's the thing.
Insanely.
That's the thing, Sumit. As Shashank's rightly said, if a team retains 7 players or 8 players, they're not in the auction. So imagine you're not going to have the drama of competitive bidding for an Abhishek Sharma, right?
Yeah.
So what I'd like to see is that I expect, and Shashank, correct me if I'm wrong, I expect the BCCI 2025 onwards to say 4 retentions or 5. Now, in this case, I'll take Sunrisers as a team, and help me out here, because the journalist perspective is what I love here. Say the Sunrisers can retain only 1 foreigner, and they say, okay, we'll retain Pat Cummins because all-rounder we want. So
Captain.
we're letting go of Travis Head. Abhishek Sharma knows, he's watched auctions over the years. He's going to think, should I take the safety of a 15, 16, maybe 20 crore retention, or should I gamble and go into the auction?
The question is,
Huh.
sorry to cut you,
Yeah.
does Pat Cummins want to be retained?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
he's paid 20 crore.
Yes.
If he were to be retained,
He'd
then
want
he's
25.
only going to get 17 crore, assuming that the salary cap remains 100 crore.
you're true,
So it's a pay cut for a World Cup winning captain who's taken the team to the final. So in that sense, it's a pay cut, isn't it? And it's a big pay cut. What's the percentage drop? 20 crore to 20.5 to 17 crore.
Yeah.
So does he want to be retained?
Does he want to be retained? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big question. And easy to say that, okay, they'll retain him and, they'll get him and all that. Point is, can they afford to? KKR with Mitchell Stark, who's probably paid 23?
24.75.
24.75. So if he were to be the first retention, probably 17 crore. That's a loss of about 7.5 crore.
But there's going to be an increase in the purse.
There is going to be an increase in the purse.
Then that means
probably that 17 crore will become a 20 crore thing.
Yeah.
Even then, it's a bit
still a pay cut for Stark.
It will be a pay cut. Unless, of course, the franchise and the player have a kind of a agreement where they get him into sponsorships and all that. I mean,
which they shouldn't.
You don't know how that's going to work out. It's a grey area which we don't know much about because not a lot is spoken about. But these are questions that come about, when you talk about retentions and budgets and all that. That's an interesting thing there.
What I'd like to see is that if say maybe 25 crore can be kept as the first retention. So people like Stark and Cummins, who went for the highest money in the last auction, are not too unhappy about being retained, right? So Stark knows the highest is 25 crore. So then maybe have your slabs 25, 20, 15, 10, whatever it is. My worry is that the Indian guys, like an Abhishek Sharma who did exceptionally well, he's going to say, what money can I get? What money can I not get? So I would like a situation, and I know Shashank and I have debated a lot about this. Sumit, is there a possibility that we have a set of rules that if you're a franchise owner, none of the consumer brands that your owner owns can offer sponsorship contract to a player on your roster? Rule 1.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
On the, taking, obviously, you said, look at the Stark example, 24.75 and say have 25 as the
First retention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of that is great, but what happens to retentions number 2 and 3 and 4? That's so once you put out 25 right there, that's what happened with KKR, but then they still managed to win the league, which is a different thing. But what happens there is...
And this is a team where the owner wants 7-8 retentions, right? That's what Kavya Maran has said.
They know what they're doing. With the RTMs, right, I think it's just been an evolving thing. In 2018, it was different. I think you could... a maximum of 3 players could be retained before the auction, and then you could bring back how many RTMs? 3 RTMs in 2018,
Yeah,
I think.
And that led to a problem.
And then 22, there were no RTMs.
Correct. And what happened there, Sumit? Shikhar Dhawan went into the auction.
Yeah.
And he, prior to going into the auction, seasons 2014, 15, 16, 17, was retained at a higher value, 12.5 crore.
Yeah.
He did not get retained prior to the 2018 auction. He went into the auction.
Yeah.
The bidding stopped at a lot lower.
5.2 crore.
Yes, that's the one. And then Sunrisers put the right to match. Shikhar said, why the hell am I going to play on such a big pay cut? What happened in 2019? He requested a trade and he went to Delhi Capitals.
And that's how Abhishek Sharma came to the Sunrisers Hyderabad as part of a deal.
So it worked out well in the
2-3
end.
players.
It worked out well in the end.
Yeah.
So that's the danger with right to match, because if you're bidding in the auction...
RTM, yes, no, 2025.
No, I don't like RTM.
Ashwin also doesn't like it.
No, the player won't be happy, right? The player's going to turn around and say, I was playing on a higher salary.
Yeah.
Why should I play on a lesser salary?
So the RTM can only swing into action when there are no more bids for that particular player. So if I am Delhi Capitals and you are Chennai Super Kings, and we are going after Rishabh Pant, the bid is at 5 crore, you say 5.2.
Yeah.
I can't, just suddenly go and put my hand up and put an RTM card.
After
and
the
say,
bid is done.
So it's only after the last bid is
after the hammer.
That is when a team can swing in and say,
yeah,
this is the RTM and we'd like to write to match, and we'll get the player. It is a lot of people are assuming that the RTM card can be brought in and
no, it can't. Right at the end.
So it's only after the last bid the hammer goes down and say the bid is sealed. So there is no chance of a team that didn't want a particular player all through to cut it. Especially if it's their player, to suddenly just put up the RTM at any point in time. That can't happen.
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of no clarity on that.
Yeah.
The other thing that really interested me was Prasanna, who was on that YouTube show with R. Ashwin.
Yeah.
He was coach of one of the franchises in the Andhra Premier League.
Right.
And he brought up this interesting rule where 2 teams are going hammer and tongs, whether it's 2, 3, whatever it is. If one team can have the option of raising the paddle and increasing the bid to a predefined value, like say we both are fighting over Rishabh Pant for 5 crore, the bid is with him at 5.
Yeah.
I want Rishabh Pant at any cost, so I have a, I don't know, whatever you call it, a power play card or whatever.
Yeah, certainly.
And say I'll pay 8.5 crore. Now I'm elevating the bid
Which
to 8.5.
happens in normal auctions otherwise as well, right?
Yeah.
Anybody can raise it and say, no, I don't care.
Now,
this is what
if he really wants to fight that 8.5, he'll raise his paddle.
Yeah.
If he thinks his budget is not, he's not going to do it. And then that gives me a little bit of a, advantage in terms of getting the player. So you're narrowing down the availability of the bidding war by using that card. So maybe if teams are given that one card or whatever, call it whatever you want, power play card or whatever it is, but teams have the option of using it maybe once in the auction, where they want somebody
that
very
particular
badly.
player.
when someone they want very badly, but know that there are 3 other teams really going hammer and tongs, and it's going to be difficult.
You can see SRH doing that to Travis.
That can be one interesting option where it's happened in the Lanka Premier League as well, where they were fighting over 2 players for about Isuru Udana, I think. His price was 30 lakh at one point, and then the owner who really wanted him at any cost suddenly put his bid up and said 1 crore.
There you go.
So it's 3.5 times, three times the value.
It makes for good television.
So
it does, and a team can only do that. As
and
you
can't do
said,
it. You can't do it for every player. I think teams there should be a careful regulation that you can use one power play card or whatever you want to call it. Call it one of these fancy names. And then it just adds to the occasion, the television, the strategy, and because teams will be wary of going judiciously using that power play card on the players that they want, and not anyone and everyone just because they want to jack up the price and not get him in the end.
Correct.
And you can only do this if you have money in your purse, right?
Correct.
So if you retain all these guys for, as you said,
where's the money?
Yeah,
exactly.
Crazy.
Wow,
lots of permutations, lots of
so many things. I think.
Yeah.
That's one thing that we can do, right? I mean, we don't know the details of how things will unfold. There's a lot of time between now and the auction when it will eventually happen, and from the auction till the season starts. But I think
no trades, please, no trades.
No trades is what Dhruv is saying.
Yeah, trades, transfers. It's European football. It's for open market leagues. Close franchise leagues, simple. Keep retention, keep auction. Don't complicate it. You want to retain 3, 4, retain. Have a purse, buy in the auction. That's about it.
So many permutations, combinations, like you say, Shashank. But I think that's what makes all of this incredibly exciting and endearing. The way this side of life, the way the commercial side of things of the IPL evolve, and the implication that it has from the player to the franchisee to the journalist to the former athlete rep to the business holder to the fan. Everybody sort of has an impact, right? It has an impact on everybody, and that's the beauty of it all. And I think that's where sport brings people like us together, where we can sit and spend an afternoon and chat on these things and get so passionate and riled up about.
Of course.
And I think I've had a great time hosting the both of you on the podcast. It's been fantastic. The time has passed
very quick.
Like that. And
loved it, absolutely.
It's been fantastic. So thank you, Dhruv, first up, for coming, as always.
Pleasure.
And Shashank, thank you. This is our first in-person recording, but I hope this is the first of many.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Really glad I was able to make it, because at one point, as I told Dhruv, I told him I'm slightly dicey today because of my illness, but glad it worked out and wonderful time.
Glad for everybody else, everybody watching as well, that they could hear and watch you. So and join Dhruv and I here. So absolutely fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Yes, and I hope all of you can stay tuned to the Indian Cricket Podcast. We've got a whole lot of these conversations coming for you in the months to come. This was the first of our IPL 2025 series. We're going to try and bring this to you more often. I hope you can subscribe and stay tuned to the channel. Thanks.